Hey, what's going on? It's your boy Dalton from the Petrol List, and today we are working on the racing Lumina. Let me flip this thing around so you can see. So we've got everyone kind of piled around here, and we're gonna figure out what we're gonna do, but I am pleasantly distracted by this Mercury Cougar, and I just happen to have the owner standing right next to me. So I'm gonna hand him the mic so we can learn a little bit more about it. I'm gonna launch with a question. What is the difference between a Mercury Cougar and a Mercury Capri and a Mustang?
Hey, what's going on? It's the Petrol List.
Yeah, so the Mercury Capri came along a few years after the Cougar. The Cougar was developed as an answer to the Mustang.
Yeah.
So the Mustang came out in '64, was very popular. Mercury, there's a long story about the relationship between the Mustang and the Cougar when they were in development, but in '67, Mercury came out with the Cougar as a gentleman's Mustang, kind of an addition to the pony car line. It has a little bit longer wheelbase. It's got hideaway headlights. It's got the sequential tail lights. It had a few more engine options than the Mustang did in the early years. This is a small block 302 four-barrel car. It's a factory 4-speed car, which is fairly rare. But I found this car in Dallas in 2014. It was sold out of Eagle Lincoln Mercury on Lemon Avenue in December of '67. Had 2 owners before I found it. And I found it in a back of somebody's yard and basically drug it out, drug it home, got it running, drove it around the block once, and then started taking it apart. And this was a complete nuts and bolts down to the frame. It's a unibody construction, so it's not a frame and a body that comes off. It's all together. The structure's built into the car. Complete nuts and bolt. Everything came off the car. And we basically built it back up from scratch.
So why did the Mustang survive and the Mercury Cougar didn't?
Well, the production numbers, for one, I don't know, if you're a Cougar fan, it's one of those things that's perplexing these days because there were so many Mustangs built relative to the Cougars. They have a little more, I think personally, a little more character, but there's just a big following. And they've been making Mustangs now. I mean, they're still making them. They started in '64, they're still making them. Mercury moved on. When you got into 69, 70, 71, the cars started getting bigger, and Mercury went to an even bigger frame that eventually kind of morphed into the Thunderbird range. So when you got into the mid and late 70s, you had the Ford Thunderbird, and if you looked at a Mercury Cougar, the Ford Thunderbird and the Mercury Cougar shared a platform. So they sort of morphed out of the sports car, the Mustang realm, and they got into more of the comfortable mid-size luxury car.
Was that the fatal mistake for the Cougar?
I don't think it was fatal. I don't think it was fatal. They produced them into the 90s. So they produced Cougars into the 90s, so that it would have surpassed the Capri. The Capri came out, I think, in the early 80s maybe. But they produced, I can't remember if the last year was 96 or 98 when the last year of the Cougar. But the favored years are the Gen 1, Gen 2, and Gen 3. This would be a Gen 1, 67 to 68. 69 and 70 had a different body style, still kind of in the realm of the 69 and 70 Mustangs. And then in 71 to 73 is when the bodies started to get bigger. And it was more of a luxury car than it was a sports car. Mustang stayed in that sports car realm. Cougar drifted into the mid-size luxury realm. And marketing folks, I guess, decided there was more money there than trying to compete with the Mustang.
I hear you. Okay, now this spent some time in a museum, question mark?
It did. So this restoration was basically back to factory spec, pretty much across the board. It's got an upgraded exhaust and an upgraded carburetor. The Autolite carbs from the time weren't great, so it's got an Edelbrock carb and an upsized exhaust for a little better sound. But the objective was to bring this really back to factory spec.
Yeah.
So this was a San Jose car. In San Jose, they used the red oxide primer, which is why it's red underneath. If this car had been built in Dearborn, Michigan, it would have been gray. They used a different process. They used to call it slop gray because their primer in Dearborn was a barrel full of leftover body paint.
Is that because of the oxidation that could happen?
It was just they produced a lot more vehicles in Dearborn. They had all this extra paint, and that's what they wanted to do with it. In San Jose, they used this red oxide, so all of the cars that were produced in San Jose actually came out with this red color underneath.
Now, was it drums in the back and
came from the factory? Came from the factory. Disc brakes up front. Power assisted disc brakes up front and drums in the back.
Got it.
This car from the factory came with power steering, power brakes, air conditioning, and as I say, it was a 4-speed. This is one of, I think, about 346 of this particular option package that were made, and this is a fairly rare color.
And this was a 68.
This is a 68.
In 68, it had a lot of options.
Yeah, well, that was the other thing. Yeah, for 68, and again, this was being a Mercury.
Yeah.
They had, you could choose from a 289, a 302. Then you got into the big blocks, the 390, the 427. Okay. So they made big block cars in these. So you had more engine options. You had more accessory options.
Most difficult thing about restoring this car, and favorite thing about this car?
Well, I'll answer that in reverse.
Okay.
My favorite thing about restoring this car is its connection to the Mustang.
Okay.
A lot of the parts, I may have mentioned, they came off of the same assembly line, so they share a lot of suspension parts, a lot of body parts, engine parts. The interiors are unique, but it's pretty easy to find parts for these early generation Cougars based on the number of Mustangs that were produced. What was the other question? The hardest thing about the restoration?
Yeah.
And, I don't know if it was the hardest thing. It was difficult when I was trying to go so much with the concourse finishes.
Yeah.
My first question, I've never done this before. This is my first restoration, and my first question when I bought the car was, okay, where's the source for how it was made and how it was assembled? Well, there isn't one, because the car came off the assembly line on Monday could be way different than the car that came off the assembly line on Friday. So there really, there's a lot of good documentation out there, but there's also a lot of bad information on the internet.
Yeah.
So I guess that was difficult, filtering all of that.
The internet, you say?
Yeah. Believe it or not. But filtering through that and trying to understand what's real, what was the real finish of this particular part or this bolt was difficult, but it was also probably one of my more enjoyable aspects of doing this.
That's
a little bit of detective work involved, and and I was fortunate enough to be able to source factory assembly manuals. So I have a body assembly manual, electrical assembly manual, chassis assembly manual. Once you get into the later years, those assembly manuals are really hard to come by. So that made putting it back together pretty easy, because you're looking at the same roadmap that they used on the factory floor.
That's awesome. Can we take it down for just 1 second to see the engine and the interior?
Sure, absolutely.
Quick look at the engine and oh, nice. 302, same as the Mustang.
302 4-barrel or 4-valve, original factory AC car, factory power steering, power brakes. This car's been run a little bit. I mean, I did it back to factory spec, and I really tried to do a concourse restoration on it, but I wanted to drive it. So it shows a little bit of age. And it runs really well. And being a 4-speed, it's just a lot of fun to drive.
Gear shift. That is just so cool. Is that, so the gear shift, is that easy to drive? I feel like it would throw me off.
It is easy to drive. I mean, it's a standard 4-speed. It's over and down for reverse, and then pretty much your first is up and to the left, and then down second, up and to the right is third, and down is fourth.
Yeah.
It drives really well. I've had it on a freeway. I do think about the fact that I built it in my driveway when I'm going down the freeway at 70 miles an hour. It's always close in your mind, but it runs really well. It hadn't been on the road in a while, so we're trying to get it back into shape right now. But it really runs great. It's a fun car to drive. It's a blast to drive.
What's left?
What's left? Well, it's just because it's been in the museum, it's been in storage. We've got a little bit of work to do with the suspension. Some of the dust boots on the suspension parts are worn out, so we'll replace those. We're just going through the fluids. We've got some power steering issues that we're dealing with. We've already done the brakes, drained the fuel tank. We'll put new fuel in it, but really just trying to work through all of the fluids and make sure that it's in good shape to drive.
That's awesome.
Well, just sort of regular maintenance, basically, at this point on a 50-some-year-old car, 55 at this point, I guess.
Oh, that's awesome.
56 almost.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Much appreciated. All right. So that was a one-take tour, first one of its kind. So let me know how you like it. I think that was pretty dope, and I actually want to see if I can find more people to take me for a tour around the cars that they love. And I will see you later. I'm out. All right, let's get caught up on the racing Lumina.
Okay, so we got a lot of things going on. The guy died last night in there. He's still in there. Oh wait, Chris. Oh, that's Chris. He's fine. Never mind. My bad.